Hiragana is one of Japan's 3 writing systems and arguably the most Japanese of the Japanese writing systems. Used mainly for native Japanese words, grammatical particles, and verb endings, almost making kanji more Japanese than it already is. Unlike kanji, it is syllabary, meaning each character represents one sound with no regards to meaning. However, it wasn't always that way, and hiragana wasn't actually always hiragana either. At one point in time, the much feared kanji underwent a transformation into a very different type of writing system, yet one that pairs with its former self so well. It was stripped of its semantic and complex form, taking on a new appearance of a curvy character set. In doing so, it completely changed how the future of Japanese would be written and read. Before we talk about how it changed the future though, let's take a look back at the past and where it actually came from. Back in the day, Japanese relied entirely on using Chinese characters. But there was a problem. Chinese characters are Chinese, and Japanese isn't Chinese. So there was bound to be some problems. The grammar was different, the words were different, the sounds were different. It was basically as far from a straightforward conversion as it could have been. To make up for this, something called manyogana was used. This was essentially the use of individual kanji for their reading to write down a sound. The semantic meaning was discarded, and instead people solely used the readings just to get speech onto paper. This was also used to write names down and basically any other thing that people could say out loud. So pretty much everything. But if people could already write anything down with this writing system, why was it changed? Well, that comes down to the fact that it wasn't very polished, like at all. Mainly, these looked exactly like kanji, which could easily lead to problems and a lack of context. The manyogana could be mistaken for having a meaning when they really were just there as a particle or even part of a word. Also, having the same appearance of kanji and the complexity coming with it, you get a lot less bang for your buck, so to say. Now, that complex character made up of all these parts is just reduced to a single sound, which seems like kind of a waste. Another reason which has a bit of nuance, which I'll mention in a second, is that there are multiple characters for each sound. Mo might use these characters, or she could use these characters. There wasn't just one single character for each sound like there is now. The nuance though, which kind of contests what I just said slightly, is that there may have been similar sounds that were differentiated in Old Japanese but merged since then. But it's kind of hard to go ask an ancient Japanese person about that, and there aren't exactly recordings of people speaking back then, so it is a bit tough. Though there is evidence. Part of that evidence being the different characters used for the same sounds. Anyways, not to delve into that too much. The manyogana were not the perfect writing system. Is there a perfect writing system? I'm not really sure, but it definitely wasn't the manyogana. Due to this, it had a decline in use over the years, although the decline was very natural and even led to a new script. Women and commoners were not formally trained in writing Chinese. This led to onade, literally woman's hand. It was, as the name suggests, written by women's hands. Since they didn't get formal training on how to write the Chinese script, this onade writing was less related to Chinese characters. Though obviously it still was related to the manyogana, which were Chinese characters. All of this essentially led to the creation of the hiragana beta version. That natural change was largely due to cursive. Basically, the entire point of cursive is to blend strokes together and reduce the writing time. And with that comes more curvy writing. All of those sharp angles or corners where different strokes meet might end up just looking like one single squiggly line. So a manyogana character like this was smoothed out to something more elegant and, more importantly, quicker to write, read, and caused a little less confusion from similar looking characters. This was a really good start to hiragana, however, it was far from complete. How I said it was the beta version of hiragana, that was kind of untrue. It was more like an open source app that people could kind of just do their own thing with. Maybe a book will be released like this, and a flyer will go out looking like this. The point is, it varied widely. Not too widely because they were still mainly based on the same characters. However, they were inconsistent. Those different characters for the same sounds were still used in this beta version too, just adding even more complexity. Also, one thing about cursive, which I think goes for most languages, is that you can kind of add your own flair to it. You can obviously do this to whatever writing you want, we have free will after all, but I think it is more acceptable to do it in cursive. Especially when it's your book or even your diary. A lot of writing at the time for women using onade were actually diaries, and writing a diary gives you a lot more freedom to shape the writing how you want. All of this basically adds up to make it really varied, kind of confusing, but even through all of that, a viable option for writing. Viable doesn't mean perfect though, and if you consider modern hiragana perfect, or at least as close as humans can get to a perfect syllabic writing system for the Japanese language, this script was still a ways off from that. I don't know why I wrote that so complex in the script. Everything I have just talked about, all of the different writing styles and variations are labeled as hentaigana now. No, it's not a weird name, it just refers to the variation of the characters. These variations came to an end in the early 1900s due to reforms, which when you think about it is extremely recently. These hentaigana were used for a really long time, and for a good amount of that time, it wasn't just used by women and commoners. It did branch out to being used by the general public. I guess commoners by the general public. This version in the early 1900s I would call the actual beta of hiragana. They were uniform now and a lot easier to read. Still a beta version though, because there were some things in there that didn't end up making it to the modern hiragana we know today. The two obvious ones being wi and we, but there was also wo. While still used as a particle, it's not just used for the sound anymore. With some natural deprecation of things and the 1946 reform, hiragana was basically complete. So, what about some examples now? I wanted to actually take a look at some of the more interesting manyogana and how they became hiragana. If you want to look at a chart for this one is in the description, and I do really like this one because it shows the intermediary stages, which I think is pretty cool. One thing I always thought was weird about ka is that it has a little thing here. I thought it was weird that there was just a little line there for seemingly no reason, especially when there should be room for dakuten there, I would think. However, it makes a lot of sense when you look at the original character. The line was originally an entire mouth radical. Same goes for u and a, both having a little thing at the top of the kanji that was preserved. O also has it, but looking at the evolution, it is slightly more abstract. By the middle stage, the person radical was just turned into a line, and the other lines were turned into the big curve. There are also the hiragana that are two separate parts, which contain an obvious left and a right side. Unsurprisingly, the original kanji were made up of two components that were on the left and the right side. Then there are the complex ones, that even with the intermediary step seem like a super drastic change. Surely there could have been a simpler kanji to represent the sound at the time, right? Like ki, for example. The kanji it comes from is super complex, and the intermediary character looks pretty cool to me, and I kind of wish this was still used in some sort of way today. Anyways, you can see that it has a lot of strokes, with ki almost having as many strokes as just one single component of the original kanji. Contrasting this big character becoming small, there is ko, which essentially kept the original shape, all while reducing the stroke count and making it quicker to write. That's all though. I could keep going about these, but it will take me far too long to edit. So here are some of the ones that I did like. If you did enjoy the video, please do like and subscribe. It would be greatly appreciated. I'm thinking about doing a video about katakana as well, because that is pretty interesting. From what I've read so far, compared to the hiragana evolving naturally in a cursive style, katakana was deliberately made in order to document and record things by monks and other people that record things. I don't know who else really records things that much. I guess the law people that record the laws and documents. So that should hopefully be cool. Anyways, thanks for watching, and thanks for 200 subscribers. Why can I not say the word subscribers? Anyways, thanks for watching, and thanks for 200 subscribers as well. Bye-bye.